All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at, and thank you for joining us. This is the Telerik R3 release webinar. All right, if you are already using our stuff, thank you for your patronage. If you're new to Telerik and Kendo UI, we have a lot to cover. We are really going to unpack everything that we did in our R3 release to kind of end the year strong. So just for introductions, we are both developer advocates. I'm Sam Basu.
I'm Ed Charbeneau.
Yep. I'm from Pennsylvania, he's Kentucky. Those are our Twitter handles if you need to get hold of us anytime. Now, we are doing this live in person, so you can see us in video. This is something we did last time, and the feedback was you guys liked seeing us in video. And the good thing is, now you're kind of catching us whatever we are in the middle of. And we are right now at a conference called Tech Bash.
So, Sam, you wouldn't believe this, but last night, this was my Uber until midnight. Turned into this pumpkin.
Oh,
yeah. We're doing this live, so we must be out of our gourds, right?
There you go, there you go.
Aren't you glad you came?
Yeah, we are live here from a conference called Tech Bash in Pocono Mountains. It's great. We are with other developers. We're all trying to learn from each other, and we get to do this live, and you can see us in person. So thank you again for joining us. So a few housekeeping things before we're going to get started. You only see the two of us here, but we actually have a small army kind of supporting us. And you're giving us an hour of your time. So make the most of it. Ask us anything you want. This hashtag #HeyTelerik is for Twitter. So you can have questions asked that are public, and then we can follow up. It's a long trail that we can leave. And we have PMs and engineers who build our stuff kind of watching this. So ask whatever you need to ask. We often get the question like, what happens if you have to run for a meeting or something? Don't worry, everything is being recorded in high def. And as soon as we can, we'll put it up on our YouTube channel so you can catch the webinar later on if you need to. Prizes, right? So another reason why you should be asking us questions is the best question at the end of the hour gets an Xbox One S. Yeah, pretty cool. Latest gen gaming console, so ask away. Ask on Twitter. If Twitter is not your thing, there is a webinar Q&A panel. Just fire away your questions, and we are here to answer them live. If not, we are going to answer them over text, and all of our PMs and engineers are kind of tuned in. So please ask questions. This is your hour. Now, before we start with Telerik, I think let's talk about .NET, because a lot of things are changing, right?
Yeah,
things are
absolutely.
evolving. Yeah, so we are in the business of making modern UI for .NET developers. No matter what you're building, we want to be helping you be successful. So let's take a look at where .NET is. I'm sure you have seen this slide from Microsoft. It's evolving. It's not just one monolithic .NET. You have several .NETs depending on the type of app you're building. If you are using the .NET framework, it's going to be fine. No one's taking it away. All of your WPF, WinForms, ASP.NET applications will run fine on .NET framework for the longest time. .NET Core is new. It's lean, modular, cross-platform. And .NET Core has gone through some iterations as well. And then there is Mono, which is the Xamarin front. So pick the .NET that works for you for your web, desktop, and mobile apps. Pick the tools that work for you, be it Visual Studio or VS for Mac, VS for Code, Visual Studio Code. We want to give you UI and our controls and our frameworks and components ready for use, no matter how you, wherever you are.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning too that .NET Core is extremely stable now.
Yep.
It's definitely something you can use in production. It's got feature parity with ASP.NET framework 4.6.1, so you should be able to use that just fine without running into any hiccups with libraries and stuff that you've already been accustomed to using.
Yeah, things are coming along nicely. So what can we do for you? We essentially are making like two different line of things. So Progress Telerik is our suite of products for all things .NET. Again, web, desktop, mobile, any app, any platform. And then we have Kendo UI, which is about 6 or 7 years old now. This is our JavaScript and front-end web component library. And really, I mean, Kendo UI is an epitome of how things have evolved in the web stack.
Yeah.
We started off as a pure jQuery library, and now we make components for Angular, React, and Vue. But again, I mean, .NET developers don't have to use JavaScript if they don't want to, right?
Very little of it.
Yeah, because I mean, we'll give you wrappers. If you're using ASP.NET MVC or ASP.NET Core, we'll give you wrappers that render Kendo UI on the front end without you actually having to do the JavaScript stuff.
And what's nice is it's one framework that powers all of our tooling. So if you decide to change frameworks later on, you'll still have that same knowledge that you can transfer. And then you still know all the CSS styling, and the APIs are identical across the board. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so R3 2018, we want to finish the year off strong. If you're again, new to us, we do 3 major releases every year. R1, R2, and R3, and then we do service packs in between. This was a big release. So we packed in a lot across web, desktop, and mobile. Now, you're going to see us talk through some of these things over an hour, but again, we cannot cover everything. So check out blogs.telerik.com. For every one of our products, we take the time and effort to write it up exactly what we have changed across all of these products, and then we try to give you examples and how to use our stuff. And this is also a place where all of us, we write, and it's not just like Telerik content or Kendo UI content, it's just genuine developer content that we should be knowing as developers. So check out blogs.telerik.com. I think you'll see a lot of future-facing, solid developer content coming from us.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, so the R3 release actually went out about 10 days or 14 days back. So it's out there, hot bits. Go get the hot bits however you want. And I mean, people use different ways to kind of get our stuff. So if you're using just Telerik.com, if you go on to your subscriber downloads, you'll see the new bits. We don't recommend, but if you have to roll back, you'll see all of your older bits there as well. You could use the control panel.
Yeah, that's my favorite. Just hit one button, select all, hit done.
Exactly, and all of these new things will show up as updates on new things, so you can choose which ones to install. My favorite is actually NuGet, because then I don't have to go outside of my projects. It shows up right there as an update to my NuGet packages, and this is true for web, desktop, and mobile. So bottom line is get the hot bits. Everything that we are going to show off today, they're going to be part of the R3 release. If you're not seeing those examples or demos, you just don't have the hot bits. So please upgrade so you see all the things that we're going to talk about. Now, the other thing we want to talk about is, this is something we spend a lot of time on. As a developer, if I'm struggling, then that's not good, right? And we want to eliminate any developer's struggles. One good saying is, if your documentation is not good, then you might as well not make the product. It just doesn't make sense. So we spend a lot of effort trying to make sure our docs are refined and they provide thorough developer-facing examples. So take a look at docs.telerik.com. All of the examples and all of the products that we show today, we will have nicely worded documents that can help you out. Something else we did is your apps, be it web, desktop, or mobile, they don't live in a silo nowadays. You are likely using either a public cloud or maybe you're using a hybrid solution. So no matter what you're using, we have documentation that helps you, be it Azure, be it AWS or Google Platform, how to have your data or services in the cloud and then integrate with stuff that's on-prem and our UI.
So you'll find things like how to integrate with machine learning and vision APIs and things like that.
Exactly, yeah. So we are trying to help, and these are legitimate developer concerns that we're trying to address. Another thing we did is updates to a lot of our sample apps, because I mean, that's how we kind of get started to see, okay, how do I actually use this UI in my applications? So check out the sample apps that we have updated for a lot of things in Xamarin, for WPF and UWP and ASP.NET. So a lot of new demos, play around with this. All right, so kind of stepping back a little bit, in R2 of this year's release, we did something really big. And that was Conversational UI. This is modern UI for chatbots. And I mean, we have a big portfolio of products, right, across web and desktop and mobile. This was a time where we were able to do something across the board. So we thought chatbots are a way for enterprises to kind of automate their workflows. So let's give you smart UI so you can ship your apps faster. And if you look through the products list, we do this everywhere, starting from Kendo UI to ASP.NET all the way back to desktop. So it's platform agnostic, doesn't care what bot framework you're using. And this has been very popular over the last few months. I think we have written a lot of articles as to how to hook up things with different services and how to actually put this in action. And we are hearing from customers that, I mean, this is something they are really excited about. And we are continuing to evolve the chatbot UI.
Yeah, we've seen several updates in this release. We'll talk about those coming up here.
So conversational UI is big, and it's one way we think we are pushing the envelope towards making next-gen apps. Okay, R3, 2018, big release. Again, I mean, there's a lot to cover here, but again, we're going to break this down for web, mobile, and desktop, and reporting and productivity. Essentially, the overall theme is we are trying to give you modern UI, no matter what type of app you're building. And yes, I mean, if you're coming in new to Telerik and Kendo UI, you have a lot of new things to play around with. But it's also our effort to kind of keep providing added value within your DevCraft bundle, if that's what you're using. So a lot of these things just show up in your tool set. And it's there for you to use. So we are trying to push the envelope. We are trying to get modern UI and sharp and performant UI for all of the web and the desktop and mobile stacks, right? Yep. So that's kind of an overall theme for R3. Now, the way we're going to do this is Ed is our resident web expert. So we're going to let Ed take over and show us all the web stuff, and then I'm going to come back and show you mobile, desktop, and a few more demos, and that's how we'll roll. So keep asking the questions on the Q&A panel, also on Twitter. So with that, let me hand it over to Ed here. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to talk about modern UI for ASP.NET. And I'm talking about ASP.NET Core and MVC right now. And we'll touch on ASP.NET Ajax in a little bit here. So ASP.NET MVC and Core, we've got support for ASP.NET Core 2.1. So if you do File New Project, we've got templates in there for you. You can select your version of ASP.NET Core. We've also got support for SignalR included, so things like the grid have built-in support for SignalR, and we'll show some demos of SignalR here in a little bit. We also have tag helpers. So this was actually part of the R2 release, and we're continuing this on into this release. So any of the new UI components have tag helper support, and we have tag helper support for all of the components. So it's 60+ components, and anything else that we've added is also getting tag helper support for ASP.NET Core. So you can use tags and attributes to write your UI, and if you're not a fan of that razor markup and escaping in and out of your HTML and C# code, this might be the perfect choice for you.
Yeah, and this was no small effort. Now you can do tag helpers for everything.
Yeah, it was quite a huge investment. It's something that people were asking for, so we built it into the product. Now we have all of our components are covered. We covered half in R1 and the other half in R2, yeah. And now we just need to update our brand new components, like the MultiColumnComboBox and the ArcGauge have tag helpers included as well in this release. So these are two brand new controls. I'm going to go over these in detail, exactly what they are. The MultiColumnComboBox, this is something that customers kept asking for. I believe this may have started with a question on how do I insert a data grid inside of a drop-down box? So we got customer feedback on what the use cases were for something like this, and what we ended up with was a very feature-rich component where we can display robust data inside of a drop-down list or drop-down box. And we have features like server-side filtering, virtualization, grouping, which is really, really slick. I'll show that here in a moment. Filtering, and of course, it's supported with tag helpers. So let's go look at some demos. Let's see that MultiColumnComboBox in action. Because, like I said, it's something that's very rich UI-wise, and you have to really see it in action to appreciate it. So like a normal drop-down box, you just want to select an element of data. But with the MultiColumnComboBox, we have the ability to see exactly what it is we're selecting. So if we want to select a customer from our list of customers in our database, we can see things like what country they're from, what company they work at, and so on, and we can just select that item off the list. So it gives us a really contextually aware way of selecting our data from our dropdown. And like I said, it has very rich UI features. So we have things like grouping, and this has to be one of my favorite features of the combo box, or the multi-select box here. So if I scroll down, notice when I pass by the country names that it's updating in the header of this drop-down box. So this gives us a nice way of seeing all of the records here grouped by the country, and it's a very intuitive experience for somebody that's working on the application and they need to select some data from the list. Let's go jump into Visual Studio and see how exactly we would implement something like this. So I'm going to jump into a demo I've got running here in Visual Studio, and let's jump over to the combo box demo. So the multi-select combo box, I'm going to show you how that we add this to an application, and we'll do some modifications on it here. Let me get my Solution Explorer out of the way. And you can see I'm using Razor HTML helper here to build up a multi-column combo box. We set a name and a data field and a data value field. So this tells us when we select an item where the text is going to come from that's displayed in the selected items text box and what value we've selected from it. And then much like our data grid, we can go into our multi-column combo box and we can add columns from our data sets to that combo box. And then finally, we set up a data source, and we can have multiple types of data sources here. We can read using Ajax. We can have an external OData data source. So it's very robust and flexible in the way it binds data, just like any of our other UI components. So let's go back into our view for a second here and look at what we're displaying. We have name and ID, and let's add another column to this just to see how easy it is to add a column to the multi-select combo box. So I'm going to uncomment the code here. So I have columns.add, and this is my API for building up this extra column. So I have columns.add, and I just need to specify the field. This is going to be the property name of my object, and then I can give it a meaningful title. So this is what will display as the column header. So I can save this and go back and refresh, and now I'll have 3 columns of data, and the third column will be my units in stock. So just as easy as that was to add, I have my units in stock, and you can see those displaying. Now let's go back into our code for a minute and enable filtering on this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to tell it to filter on the server side. I have a nice OData service that I'm calling out to. So I'm going to add server filtering is true on my data source. And then I'm going to tell it what type of filter I'd like to use. I'm going to do a contains filter. So if I start typing something in the filter box that contains the value, then it's going to start filling that data in. I'm going to set auto binding to false because I don't want to pull all the records from my server if I don't have to, because we're going to be filtering this data. So I'm going to set this to auto bind to false, and then as soon as somebody types 3 characters or more, we'll go ahead and start filtering that data. So we'll go back here again and refresh. And now when I start typing in names, you can see that immediately it filters that data and displays it in the drop-down box. So as soon as I keyed in 3 keystrokes, those names showed up. And then I can select from that list, and it's a nice, quick, and intuitive interface for people to use.
Yeah. What about the data sources? Like, you can bind this to anything behind the scenes, right?
Absolutely. You can bind it to an OData data source, anything that can put out JSON or XML format we can consume within the control and bind to that data.
Okay.
Another brand new control for us is the ArcGauge. So this is an SVG rendered gauge that we can use to build dashboards and really rich UIs for monitoring data and things like that. It's very customizable. You can change the colors. The center piece has a template section, so we can decide what we want to display on the inner part of the gauge. It's got animations. It's perfect for those big dashboard applications. Maybe you're monitoring IoT devices or something like that. So let's go back into Visual Studio. I have another demo that I'm going to open up here. So we can take a look at our ArcGauge. It's a nice looking ArcGauge. This page so far is very simple. I'm using a tag helper, and I have my Kendo ArcGauge, given it a name. I've set the value to default at 50, and that's what we're seeing on the screen a moment ago. And then I have a template that displays the value and an added % sign to the end of it. So we can display 50% inside that center template. Now, I want to do something fun with this. I want to show how flexible this is and quick and easy we can create something cool. So I've got a SignalR service that I've created inside of this application. I'm just going to hook that up. So I've got this commented out because nobody wants to see me type live on a video, unless we're on Twitch. So I've created my connection to my SignalR hub, and I have a hub it's a gauge hub that's going to keep piping down values to my ArcGauge. So this is a WebSocket connection, and it's going to be a live connection to my server, and it's going to keep pushing data down to me and updating my gauge in real time. So I'm going to start a connection.
And so just to back up, so SignalR is the new real-time support, and this is new in ASP.NET Core 2.1, right?
Yes, so ASP.NET Core has full support for SignalR now with ASP.NET Core or SignalR Core, and it opens a live WebSocket connection, so you can receive data and update your web page live without interacting or polling or any of those sorts of things. Okay, cool. So we're going to add that to our gauge right now. When we receive a message, So when that connection receives a message, we're going to fire an event, and we're going to receive a value from the SignalR service. And when we receive that value, we want to update our gauge value. So I'll find my gauge on the page, and then I'll specify that this is a Kendo ArcGauge, and then set the value to whatever incoming value came in from SignalR. So we'll go ahead and close off our last set of braces here and save. We should be able to go back to our web page. Now I'm going to be hands-off here and watch the gauge update on its own in real time. So the server's sending down data to my web page, and it's saying there was an update to this value, and the SignalR client is telling the gauge to go ahead and update that in real time. I'm not doing page reloads or anything like that. It's just the ArcGauge receiving the information and displaying it in real time.
That's pretty cool. Like if you're building like dashboards, like this is helpful.
Yeah.
To update your charts and graphs in real time.
So you could have, say, an IoT device that's monitoring temperature, something like that, and it's showing a nice fluid gauge in real time. So and it's very fast and efficient. And you could hook this up to the brand new Azure SignalR service. So it's extremely scalable. So you could, you don't have to worry about server infrastructure and all of those things. And you can have these really cool gauges and other UI components that we build, monitoring things in real time and working multi-tenant and all those really large-scale type of application scenarios.
So before I guess you go on to the next one, we got a couple of questions. So let's take a minute to kind of answer some things.
Okay.
Michael asked if I can get a copy of the Wicked intro music. So it's royalty free. So just ping us on Twitter. We'll send you a link. Are there GitHub projects showcasing any of our demos and our products? I mean, we do have demos that we can just play around with on the web, like just in your browser. What else on the ASP.NET side?
If you go to demos.telerik.com, not only are there individual demos per component, but there's actually large-scale demos as well that you can download with full source code. And we have things like dashboard demos, mail client demos. There's one called Trip Expert that is kind of like a, the popular hotel booking services and things like that. So they're fully themed, some of these, so you can see how to edit the Kendo UI themes and make them seamless into your application.
Okay. Simon asked if there's a way to provide us feedback and propose updates. Yes, absolutely. Just go to feedback.telerik.com and then kind of drill down your product and give us updates on whatever you like. Simon is also ahead of the game. He said the new hamburger menu is really cool for WinForms, which we'll talk about. API docs, is there any difference between documentation on MVC side versus Kendo and JavaScript?
So yes and no. All of the components that are in Telerik UI for ASP.NET Core and Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC are powered by Kendo UI. So when you're on the server side and you're building things with HTML helpers and tag helpers, then you want to look in the documentation for the Telerik UI for Core or MVC. When you jump over to the client side of things and you have to do client-side interaction through JavaScript, then it's helpful to jump into the Kendo UI documentation for jQuery, because that's where you're going to find all of the client-side documentation. So it kind of lives in both worlds, but the benefit is when you're using those HTML helpers and tag helpers, you're writing a lot less JavaScript. So there's very minimal JavaScript that you're going to need unless you have to do something that's very custom on the client side. Yeah.
All right, and Ross asked if the multi-column combo box allows for multiple value selections. Yes. There's an API setting you can change single or multiple. All right, so let's watch our time. Let's go on to what's next, and we'll come back to questions.
All right, so we've updated our TreeList view. So this component was already a very nice, robust way of digging into a tree of data, but now we've added a lot of features that came out of our data grid, or very similar to our data grid. Things like batch editing. I mean, that's huge. Multi-column headers, client-side paging. If you need really high performance and you want to take advantage of the power of the clients these days, that we've got a lot more robust devices that we can do a lot of the work offloaded onto the client. So we can take advantage of that. And then we've improved the localization on the tree list as well. So I'm going to jump over to demos.telerik.com again. I want to show off batch editing a little bit here. So we talked about demos.telerik.com in that last Q&A session we just did there, Sam. So if we go to Kendo UI Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC, on the right-hand side is the sample applications I was talking about. So if whoever asked that question, this is where you'll find those really rich demos that have full integration of multiple components.
Okay, so one quick question that I think several people asked, is the SignalR stuff usable from all versions of Kendo UI? Or is it just ASP.NET Core? Because I mean, it has to be ASP.NET Core supported on the server side, right?
On the server side, yes. On the client side, the newest version of SignalR has no dependency on jQuery, but it's completely JavaScript based.
Okay.
And then on the server side, it may be the next version, it may be ASP.NET Core 2.2. They're actually expanding support for SignalR into Java. So there's actually some server-side technologies that are going to be able to host SignalR services.
Okay.
One other thing I want to point out about demos.telerik.com is these little green flags that show up. This is a place to check whenever we have updates. So whether it's a big R123 release or we have service pack releases, check our demos.telerik.com site for these little green flags that are next to different component names. And these are things that have been updated. So I'm going to click into the tree list here. And I want to show this in-cell editing. So again, the little green flags tell me there's something new here. And I'm going to go into in-cell editing. And my screen is a little bit small for this, so I don't think I can see most of the columns here. So that's it's one of the hiccups of broadcasting something on a live stream is you have to go to a smaller screen size, so we can't really see many of these columns. But what we can do is we can edit right here in line, so I can change somebody's name, and you'll notice a little red tick box come up next to the name, which also, yep, there it goes. Yep. So we get a little red tick box that shows that data has changed, and then we can click Save Changes. If you scroll down in this demo, we have the actual source code for the application or the demo here. What I want to do is click over to the editing in-cell controller. So this is the code for the controller action. And if you scroll through here, you can see that, and again, there we go. We're binding to an IEnumerable of employees. So we're actually sending back a full list of all the changes that have been made. And we're binding an entire list on the server side. So that's how that works. When you make all those changes and click Save, you'll get a list of all of those changes sent back to the server so you can act upon those and make the changes persistent in the database. So lots of new features there in the tree view. We also added a new feature to our chat. So you mentioned the UI chat. The chatbot UI stuff that we've added in the last release, we've updated that. We've added a new customizable toolbar, so you can click on the 3 dots in your toolbar and you can create an entire toolbar of different things that you can use to interact with your chat app. So in our example on demos.telerik.com, we can add an image into our chat. But these are completely customizable. You can add icons to them and add custom actions to them. And I've done demos in the past where I've injected things like calendar components and things like that into the chatbot.
This is just natural UX. Yeah.
Another thing that we've updated is the radial gauge. We have the ability to do multiple pointers now. So again, you can have radial gauges like this, and then we have the ArcGauge, so you can build some really complex data-driven dashboards.
So before you go on to Ajax, one quick thing. Alexander was asking if all of like the 7+ components in ASP.NET Core, you can use them all through tag helpers, right?
Everything in ASP.NET Core has tag helpers now.
So like choose however you want to render Razor or tag helpers. We have you covered. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So on the ASP.NET Ajax side, we focused on continuing our commitment to stability. It's a very stable product already, but we're constantly crushing bugs people give us a lot of feedback on those components and things they've had issues with, and we're taking care of all those issues. One of the things that we've done is we've updated the client-side code, which is actually Kendo UI. So we've updated it to the latest versions of Kendo UI, and so Kendo UI powers all of this stuff. And you mentioned that earlier, I'm going to mention it again. Kendo UI powers all of the .NET, ASP.NET stuff behind the scenes. We have these nice abstractions to make it easier for you to write a lot less JavaScript. We have Razor tag helpers. We have Visual Studio support with scaffolding and file new project templates. And then we have rich JavaScript APIs client-side that are all based, or are actually Kendo UI. And if you're considering other projects where you don't have the opportunity to use ASP.NET, and you don't have Razor and tag helpers at your disposal, we support jQuery, Angular, React, all the popular JavaScript frameworks. So make sure you continue to use JavaScript or Kendo UI on your regular JavaScript apps as well.
Yeah, I think the overall theme of what you're saying is, we understand the realities of enterprise development, and if you're doing web forms or WinForms and WPF, it actually does not mean that you are kind of maintaining legacy code. You can just as well update your applications, use some of the Kendo UI stuff on the front end, and make sure your applications are nice and forward-facing. And then you can slowly bring in MVC and update to core as and when you see fit. But we are sharing the love. We are putting in investments in the web forms stack as much as we are doing it for MVC and core.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So that's all the web stuff. I'm going to leave it to you. If you have any other questions to answer on the web technologies, feel free to. But let's move on to the other stuff. Let's talk about mobile. All right. So now we're kind of getting into mobile and desktop a little bit. And notice how I say it's not mobile apps, because there are different ways in which you can go address the mobile form factor. You don't have to build apps all the time. In fact, like to his point, Kendo UI, you could be building mobile web that is fairly sophisticated, and there are multiple frameworks that will help you. There's Kendo UI, there's Foundations, there's Twitter Bootstrap. So go build mobile web if that's your thing. You can also take it to the next level and build progressive web apps. And again, we can power your progressive web apps with Kendo UI. But if you are into building apps actually for mobile devices, let's see what we can do. And let's see what this means for .NET developers in particular. And I'm talking Xamarin, because Xamarin, I think, is, the ship has sailed. It's the easiest way for .NET developers to take our code cross-platform and have it work on iOS and Android. This is where Xamarin had first started, Xamarin iOS or Xamarin Android. You have a shared C#, but you write different UIs. And then there's Xamarin Forms, which I'm a big fan of, because you don't have to learn iOS and Android. You can still have a shared UI code in XAML, and it still powers all of your cross-platform apps. Now, no matter what you pick, Xamarin iOS or Xamarin Native or Xamarin Forms, we want to make sure we give you the right UI so you can ship your apps faster and it's polished and performant. So we have been spending a lot of time on the Xamarin front, because we see the uptake from developers since the Microsoft acquisition. I think it truly democratizes .NET dev. It's truly native and cross-platform apps. So let's see what we did for you in UI for Xamarin Suite. Lots of new controls. Just a quick overview if you have not used it. It's a suite of UI controls that you can use however you want. So Visual Studio on Windows or VS for Mac, bring it in. We will give you VS toolboxes so you can see all of our UI. You can drag and drop. If you're starting greenfield projects, we'll give you nice templates. And even like, as I'll talk about it, there are some templates that really help even if you already have an app. You can bring in pure DLLs, or you can bring our bits in through NuGet. And again, don't take my word for it for any of this. We try making the best UI for Xamarin developers. There are sample apps in the store. I'll show you one of them. Play around with these sample apps, both for iOS and Android and UWP as well, and see some of this UI in action. So let's take a look at what we did. Several new controls for R3. Autocomplete, we had this, but we kind of revamped this because we got some feedback from people who are using it. So don't let the user type a whole lot, offer suggestions, and you can bind this to any data source behind the scenes. You can have remote searches working now. So as you're typing, you can control how many characters you allow before you go off to the server and you do your search. Single or multiple selects. We added watermark and some additional filtering support. empty results if you don't find anything. I'll show you some of these things in action. Expander and accordion. So these are both controls in the same family. On a mobile device, you don't have a lot of space, and you're trying to fit in a lot of content. So this is really nice. These are placeholders. You can put whatever you want in them, and then the user gets to expand and collapse. So accordions and expanders really help. Chart series, we are, again, I mean, Telerik is known for building charts and graphs, right? So we have dozens of charts already. We added a few that we thought were missing. Financial charts, OHLC and Candlestick. They have defaults as to how your stocks or how your market values fluctuate, like the min, max, and averages. It has some of the finance calculations kind of built in. And then we already had a lot of pie charts. We added one last one. Maybe we'll do more, but this is the donut series. So again, if you want to see how you have a set of data and you want to see the proportion of it, donut is really easy. And these are very nice and interactive, so you can pinch and zoom around, you can touch, and you can move things around and see how they work. New screen templates. This is actually something I'm really fond of, because turns out when we build mobile apps, we recreate the wheel quite a bit. We keep building the same things over and over again. So we wanted to give you a little help. Even if you're not using our templates like from the get-go, you can still bring these things in. So these are Visual Studio templates that you can bring in from the Telerik extensions in Visual Studio. And they'll let you add screens that most mobile apps already need. Things like a login screen, authentication for the user, a feedback for your apps. So somebody just doesn't give you a bad review, that you can collect feedback straight away from the user. So we can drop in these screens in your apps directly from Visual Studio if you don't have these screens. And we'll already hook it up to with our UI, and then you do whatever it is needed on the back end to hook this up. So I'm a big fan of these templates because they, I think, really help. A few other things. We did a new border control, which I'll show you. This is something I'm very fond of. Lots of new APIs for this. Checkbox, it's hard to believe, but Xamarin Forms actually did not have a checkbox built in. So we made a checkbox, which is highly customizable with styles and themes. The tree view control that we had, it now does load on demand, so you're not taxing your server side. So a lot of different things that we did for Xamarin. So let's step out of the slides, and then I'll quickly show you a couple of demos. So what I'm showing you here is if you head out to this Telerik.com Xamarin UI, that's our homepage. You can see all of the controls that we built and how they work, and you can play around with this. If you hit the big download free trial button, that's what I'm showing you. We will give you a free trial with all of the bits and the example apps, and you can see how it's working. So this is the app that I'm going to show you, and this is the same code base that powers the apps that are in the store. So I'm here in Visual Studio for Mac, and I've kind of hidden away the Android and the UW project. I only have iOS for the sake of time here. And let's run this app, because this is going to show you some of the UI that we built. So I'm here on VS for Mac, so it's going to pull up the iOS simulator. This is the new iPhone XS Max, because why not? I mean, it's a gigantic screen. I love this new screen. Yeah. It's a 6.5-inch screen, beautiful glass. Okay, so here's our new UI, and this is something you can play with. Just install the app from the iOS and Android stores. So this is autocomplete view. This one here is going to show you how to do things here. Like as I start typing, you'll see the things show up here as suggestions. You can customize with templates how these suggestions look like. You can have one, you can have multiple. These are called tokens, so you can bind this to whatever you want. So autocomplete is kind of really grown up, and we do have remote searches as well with it. Expander, again, this is kind of a classic way to kind of organize your content. So you see that? I can expand and collapse all day long. So it's an easy way to kind of shove in as much as you need in a screen without cluttering up your UI. According is the same idea, except the user experience is a little different. So you get to kind of tap on the headers as the user, and that expands and collapses things automatically. So again, we're giving you things that you can put to organize your app a little better, navigation, from a navigation standpoint, I guess. Let's look at a tree view, which we already kind of looked at last release. We have added a few more things to it. Let me show you a couple of things that I'm really fond of. We have barcodes for everything now. Take a look at the border control. This is a control that you can throw in front of really anything that you want, but it helps you really have that nice polished UI. Notice the rounded borders here. Let's look at the configurator. Notice how I can control the border thickness. Yeah. And then just as easily, I can control the radius. And notice how things become like a teardrop. I can move things around. So you can kind of see that I can customize my UI, give it a nice polished feel with a border control, and you can just put anything inside of it if you need to. So take a look at all of these things that we're building. Again, lots of new charts and graphs, like I said, the financial charts. The checkbox control, it's there now, so you can bind this, and it's two-way data binding, so it works however you want with your code. So that's just a quick example of the app, and again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. You already have this code, so I don't need to walk you through. If I'm going to stop this for a second, if you need to take a look at this, all of the code that I'm showing you, none of it is platform-specific in iOS or Android. This is truly a Xamarin Forms project. So take a look at the examples here. A lot of these UI examples are nicely built up for you. So the border control, which I'm a fan of, let's look at the first look example here. And you'll see some XAML styles and things like that that we are putting in to make it look nice. But let me just show you the code here if we come all the way down. So this here is a grid, and then you notice that we are putting a rad border. That's the new UI, and then inside of it, you can put whatever. We are putting an image inside of it, but again, you can wrap it over anything you want. So all of this code is out there for you guys to play with. Just download the free trial or get the bits and then play around with it. Even the app itself will show you some of the code that we are rendering. So again, Xamarin is something we are spending quite a bit of time on because we see how fond developers are getting of Xamarin and the uptick. So let's move gears and let's talk about something else. So that's a quick demo. And again, so for Xamarin UI, our point of view is don't reinvent the wheel. And that's true for a lot of things we do. If you're building truly native cross-platform UI for iOS, Android, UWP, and other things, which we'll talk about, go grab Xamarin UI and run with it. Do you have anything you want to talk about real quick before I
have a couple questions that are still coming through on the web portion of the webinar here. Somebody asked about availability of components for AngularJS. So we're not talking about Angular 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and up. We're talking about the older version of AngularJS. If you go to demos.telerik.com and click on our jQuery library, there are demos in there on how to use that with AngularJS. There's also a question regarding tag helpers versus HTML helpers. Are there any features in tag helpers that are better than or do not exist in HTML helpers? They're actually functionally similar or exactly the same. However, on the server side, you may find a little bit more performance out of tag helpers because the underlying APIs that power those are written with new multi-threaded scenarios. So they may perform a little better. And then I had one more here about IE support. Yes, we do support IE 11 with our UI products.
Yeah, and again, that's the reality. Like, it's not always the cutting edge stuff like Angular 6 all the way up, right? People are using JS and then all the way back with older technologies, and there's nothing wrong in it. If it powers your enterprise apps and it's running your things, go at it.
Yeah, and some people don't have the ability to go outside of Internet Explorer at their workplace, so we definitely support those things, especially IE 11's the newest version of it.
Yeah. All right, so we got about maybe 20 minutes left, so let's switch gears one more time and let's talk about the other things like desktop and a little bit of reporting. And desktop is kind of become my favorite thing because it's kind of evolving. It's not just old school things anymore. You can make things very modern. And what we have is with the newer desktop, you get a lot of code sharing between web and desktop and mobile. So we are right now talking about .NET Core. We are right now at .NET Core 2.1 or 2.2, and then .NET
2.2, or 2.2 is coming.
Yeah,
it's in preview right now.
It's in preview.
And while you're talking through this, I want to keep a question in your mind that's come up several times. People are asking about SignalR support for Xamarin and SignalR support for the desktop.
Well, that really doesn't matter. As long as you have server-side SignalR, the UI can be updated anyhow you want. So it's like Xamarin and desktop, like they don't have anything to do with SignalR by themselves. But if you have a service that you're integrating your UI with, like on the back end, if it's SignalR powered, then the UI can be updated in real time.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. And then, as you guys may have heard, .NET Core 3.0 is coming, and this is something we are keeping a close eye on for early next year. So .NET Core has kind of come in waves, and we're going to kind of see the .NET Core wave hit the desktop next year. And this is going to be interesting because it has interesting implications for your WPF and WinForms app. All of those things can now be updated to run on some of the newer APIs, and you can have .NET side by side, even on desktop.
I'm going to hit one more web question while you have .NET Core 3 in mind. We have questions coming through about Blazor and what our stance is on that. The best thing for you guys to do is visit feedback.telerik.com and let us know what your needs are, because that's how we can tell what it is we need to support with those new technologies. So there is a version of Blazor that they're calling Razor Components that's shipping in ASP.NET Core 3.0. So let us know what your needs are there. Again, feedback.telerik.com is the best way to do that. There's already issues on there, just vote them up.
Yep. All right, so back to a little bit of Xamarin Forms, because I think it's important how this contributes back to desktop. Since Xamarin Forms is open source, we have now written, the community has written renderers for other platforms, not just iOS and Android. So you can now support Mac desktop applications natively. You can do Linux GTK, and you can do a little bit of WPF. So things are kind of growing and evolving, and you can see how mobile technologies can now power your desktop apps as well. If you're doing web apps, you can kind of share styles with CSS, and now you can style Xamarin Forms XAML with CSS. A few other things that are coming up. This is Marzipan. This is OS X Mojave that's going to come out early next year. But I do want to point it out that Apple is struggling with the same app gap problem in their stores, and they're going to make iOS and iPad and iPhone apps run in the desktop. And all of these apps can now be powered by Xamarin Forms. So you can kind of see how your code can just go places, and you can share as much UI code as you can. So let's talk about UWP, this is Microsoft's Universal Windows Platform, powers all of your Windows devices, tablets, Surface hubs, HoloLens, everything. We have been active in this space. We have worked closely with Microsoft. So we have 24 or so really polished and performant UWP controls, all of which is open source now, since I think it's been a year or two now. But I mean, we are seeing the community really use it. Microsoft uses our grids and charts everywhere. So take a look. It's completely free and open source for you guys to use. It's actually integrated in the template studio. So you can, as you start up a new UWP app, you can just throw in a Telerik grid just as easily. One more thing I wanted to mention is we are still going to be the shepherds of that open source project. So we are keeping on enhancing things. The calendar control now shows weekends. And this is something you see for the Xamarin front and WPF as well. Wherever we have a calendar, we can now toggle weekends on and off. Inside of our grids, when you do data binding, we can do sub-objects that are bind to grid columns. So we are keeping on sharing the love on the UWP front. One thing I wanted to mention was there's a new project, and I think it's just about to go open source, called Uno. This is a project from some really smart guys out of Montreal, and they have done what Xamarin Forms kind of did to take your .NET code to iOS and Android. They have chosen to go with the UWP XAML, because I mean XAML dialects are different. So now they have UWP XAML powering apps for iOS and Android. It is running on top of Mono, but this is interesting because it now gives you a way of using your UWP XAML to take your apps cross-platform. And by the way, we will write more about this, but the UWP controls that we have in our Telerik UI suite, they work on top of Uno. So now you can kind of see the promise and the directions we are heading in, where your UWP code can now power iOS and Android applications, which is very interesting. And then also WebAssembly comes in to kind of take your XAML back to the web. So all of those things are evolving. But desktop is also about WinForms and WPF, and this is where we see a lot of usage because WPF powers a huge amount of enterprise apps. So let's take a look at some of the things we did in the WPF land. So we have several new controls. There's a MultiColumnComboBox, which is the same thing as what Ed showed you on the web, just works nicely on WPF as well. We have an image editor in which we can now help you make a selection and have all of our tools working on that. There's a new Mac-inspired Crystal theme. This is new, and again, we have other themes like an Outlook theme. So build your WPF apps however you want, make them touch-friendly. It can be very, very modern, the desktop apps that you're building. We have a PDF viewer, which lets you see PDFs, and now anytime you have a bookmark, the end user makes a bookmark, that can now show up in the table of contents. So it's an easy way to kind of navigate. So let me watch my time here. Maybe I do have a few minutes, and I'm going to pull up my windows here really quick and try to show you the WPF stuff that we have going. So I'm on a Mac, and I'm pulling up the Windows virtual machine here real quick. Okay, there you go. So try this out on your desktop. We do have a sample app for WPF and UWP. Let me show you the WPF side of the story. This is a sample app that you can install and kind of play around with. This has all of our UI built in, so you can see what we are doing. And for any of the UI, we also show you the code as to how we render this. So this is the MultiColumnComboBox, the same thing that Ed showed you on the web. It works on WPF as well. This is the Northwind database, which never goes away, never gets old. So this is a drop-down list. So you click on that, and you will see a grid. And you can really pick on any of these things. Like you can tap on anything. We can select the row for you, and so on. So this can be hooked up to any data source that you want. And take a look at the code. We actually give you all of the XAML that we are using to do the data binding. So take a look at that. The image editor, this is the one that gets a little more love. So to your end users, you can give them a rich, polished image editor. You can now do a selection. So I can just grab a little selection thing here, and I can change things in that box. So you see how I can change just a portion of the image without affecting the rest of the image. So again, more power to your end users. I'm not going to walk you through too much code. Again, all of this code is available when you do download the free trial. We'll give you the sample app, and we'll give you all of the code. And if you run the app, you can also see the XAML and the C# that we are using to power this. Same goes with the UWP side of the story. We have sample apps, so please play around and make sure the UI that you're picking is something you're comfortable with. Okay, so let's go back to PowerPoint. Let's talk about the other side. What else we have left? We talked about WPF. This is some of the UI back in action. You see the multi-column view. You see the image editor. We have added the new Mac theme, PDF viewers with bookmarks. WinForms, again, this is not legacy at all. I don't think WinForms is legacy because, again, you're getting some of the .NET Core 3 love coming your way, and the usage of our WinForm controls is through the roof. So keep using that. We'll keep investing. A bunch of new things for you in WinForms. This is something somebody already mentioned. There is a new hamburger menu, which is very popular for web and mobile. It's just like startling that we never had this for desktop. So now we're bringing the hamburger back in the desktop. So it's a nice, easy way to kind of have a nav system that's kind of tucked away. The user can expand and collapse. We have a scheduler, which now gets an agenda view. That's day, month, or week. WinForms also get the Mac-inspired Crystal theme. And we have a thing called the Forms Converter, which is very nice. If you have a WinForms application that you're sitting on, and it's not using any of our UI, run it through the converter. We'll help you up-convert some of the UI to use Telerik UI for WinForms. So few clicks, no code, and you can kind of make your WinForms app just look much more polished. And we can we can substitute our UI wherever we see fit. So some of the UI for WinForms, you can see the hamburger menu on the left. I'm running out of time to show you a demo, but you can, again, play around with these demo apps and install them and see how it works. So form converters is something we are fond of. So take a look at WinForms. We are keeping on sharing the love on the WinForms
So
front.
I just wanted to say, Tracy says WinForms rule in all caps.
It rules.
So I think she's excited. She or he could be excited that WinForms is amazing.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so let's talk about reporting, because again, that's another interesting and important aspect of most of enterprise line of business apps. So we have something that's very popular that you guys use. It's Telerik reporting, and it's evolving. It's cross-platform. It lets you create reports for any platform and then deliver them. And then this one keeps on getting some love, and then we'll talk about the report server. PDF export, that's something we have always had, but PDF/A is sort of an ISO standard. It's used by governments to kind of archive documents. It's kind of an industry standard. So we now have PDF/A exports out of your Telerik reporting, no matter what the platform is. One thing we had, or we heard a lot from customers, was emailing out reports, because that's part of the workflow. Often you have a report that you want to email out, so now we let you, from the Telerik reporting suite itself, compose an email with the report as an attachment. And you can have multiple reports that you want to attach. And then it kind of eliminates the flow of you having to save a report down to your desktop and then attaching that over. So you can just do it all in a flow. Pie charts and other graphs, they've had some improvements. So if you have like smaller slices, they can now be consolidated into a nice little legend, which helps with readability. Progress Telerik report server, this is our suite. So we have Telerik reporting for everything, but we also see the need that you guys may need to host these reports on your own, and you need a web admin setup. So that's the whole purpose of the report server. Again, works cross-platform, and it gives your end users an admin view into how to manage your reports and how you deliver those things. So it gets some of the things that we talked about from a reporting standpoint, PDF-A exports. The few other things that we have done to this is a little more of automation. So if you have emails that go out that grab reports, you can now automate those things, and you can have single or multiple reports that you want to send out in a single email, and you can get data alerts down to your users so they know how to deliver these reports. Another thing that developers do with Report Server is use our REST API. So you can kind of integrate this from mobile apps and desktop apps. So we have actually spent some time with the REST APIs to make it a little more kind of modern, and we give you our C# wrapper, so you don't have to use kind of hard code any of your REST endpoints. We give you a wrapper so you can just do it very easily to go and get your reports or make some updates. Another thing we keep hearing is single sign-on. If you are an enterprise, you already have your Active Directory sign-on, so it is kind of a hassle to have your users sign on to one more thing for the report server. So we now have single sign-on enabled, so you can configure this thing with any login provider you want, your personal AD or Azure AD, however you're using it, and we can use a pass-through token to kind of bring your users straight into report server so they can work with the web admin. And the web admin console gets a little more love. Anywhere we use strings for filtering or whatever, we expose all of those strings out now, so you can use a resource file, so you can have it localized in whatever language you see fit. So that's a lot we covered. We have 4 minutes left. Let's do a little bit of Q&A. Yep. Anything you want to answer?
We've got some questions around emails and PDFs and all that, corporate sending reports around the office type stuff. We have, can you print PDFs or send PDFs to a printer directly? Can we email PDFs directly and those sort of things?
You can email, and I think the printer thing kind of comes into how your printer is exposing the APIs. Mm-hmm. So I might have to check documentation on that. But please, send us a note on Twitter so we can follow up on you and make sure we get you an answer.
For the main part with these things, there's even a question about doing this with the RAD grid. Most of this is our components handle creating the PDFs, yep. And then .NET Core usually, or .NET framework, is usually very good at handling the rest of that situation, either right. Sending it through an email or hooking it up to a printer, those type of things. Especially with this example of the RAD grid, you're not gonna send an email from a client web client. So you would save that PDF on the server. So you'd use the components to render that PDF on the server, and then use some server-side logic to kick off the email elsewhere.
Yeah, and then that's exactly what the report server is really good at. So let Telerik reporting generate your reports, and that can actually be done on the client side. And then you save off your reports in the report server, and then you have automation workflows to grab reports, as many as you need, and then deliver them to mailboxes or whatever it is.
So you can schedule these things.
Exactly.
Can you schedule printing as well?
I'm not sure. So on the printing front, drop us a line on Twitter or here on the webinar Q&A with your credentials or with your email, and we'll get back and make sure we give you an answer. Anything else? So I think, yeah, go on.
So there's actually a couple questions kind of bundling together an answer on.
Okay.
Let's talk about the big project that we did for Xamarin, where they can get demos. What was it called again?
Tag it, yeah.
Tag it,
yeah.
Yes.
We did several things. So essentially, we want to showcase that you can actually build real-world applications and not just simple demos that we're showing. So this was actually last year where we worked to build a demo that uses all of our UI, Xamarin UI, and it kind of calls into Azure Cognitive Services behind the scenes, and it kind of helps you tag your images or photos that you're taking on your phone. It's a nice, easy way to search for it, and that's actually in the App Store. So search for Telerik Tag It, and then you can install it on iOS, Android, and UWP, and we give you all of the source code so you can see exactly how we build it in a nice MVVM fashion. So I think we are just about time. I think the overall theme for this release is more power to developers. Let's meet you where you are at. Web, desktop, mobile will give you more and more productivity enhancements, so you can ship your apps faster. Much more work going on in the docs, so we have real world demos and walkthroughs of how to get stuff done.
Yeah.
Any last points on the web side of things?
Yeah, you know, while we're focusing on the bleeding edge, we have ASP.NET Core 2.1 support, and we're continuing to add support there. We're also still doing exercises around ASP.NET Ajax to make sure, you know, we're shoring up any bugs. And then some people missed the pumpkin jokes at the beginning. So Sam tried to squash those, but I'm sorry you missed them.
Yeah. I don't get the pumpkin jokes, but anyways, that's all it. All right, so we are right at the top of the hour. We want to thank you a lot for spending an hour of your time with us. This will be recorded, so you can catch it on YouTube, and we'll keep on answering questions on Twitter if you asked us, our PMs and our engineers, and both of us. So again, if you are using our stuff, thank you for all that you do. We hope that we give you more value out of the box, and if you are new to Telerik and Kendo UI, you have a lot to explore. Because we do a lot. I mean, we want to meet you wherever and however your technology stack is, so you don't reinvent the wheel. We'll give you the UI so you get to ship your apps faster, UI that's rich and performant.
And for everybody asking for support for Raspberry Pi and Blazor and all of these things that we don't already support, feedback.telerik.com is the best way to make those things happen.
All right, so that's it from us for this release. We will see you next release. In the meantime, stay productive, go build modern UI for all of your web, desktop, and mobile apps. And that's it. Keep developing and have fun.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.